The morning light came thin through the windows of the Montana Veterans Affairs Hospital, casting long shadows across linoleum floors that had seen 40 years of footsteps. Dorothy Sullivan moved between the beds with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this work when it mattered, when lives hung in the balance and every second counted. That was a long time ago. Vietnam, 1968. A different war, a different woman. Now she folded blankets. She was 80 years old, and her hands still remembered the exact pressure needed to find a pulse in the dark. They remembered tourniquets and chest compressions and the weight of dog tags slipping into her pocket when there was no one left to wear them. The hospital let her volunteer 3 days a week. It was enough to feel useful, not enough to feel necessary. A television mounted in the corner played the news with the sound off. She didn't need to hear it. The same stories cycling endlessly. Somewhere, someone was angry. Somewhere, someone had lost something they couldn't get back. The veterans in the beds around her understood that better than most. Mrs. Sullivan, she turned. One of the older patients, a Korean War veteran named Charlie Ness, was awake. His eyes were cloudy but alert, the kind of alertness that came from decades of light sleeping and old instincts that never quite went away. "You're here early," he said. "Couldn't sleep." "Frank," she nodded once. Charlie knew. They all knew. Frank Sullivan had died 3 years ago in a room 2 floors up, his lungs finally giving out after years of fighting what Agent Orange had left behind. The cancer had taken him slowly, methodically, the way a good soldier dismantles an enemy position. No mercy, no quarter. He was a good man, Charlie said. Yes. Stubborn, though. Dorothy allowed herself a small smile. That too. Charlie shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. "You know what he told me once? Said the hardest part of war wasn't the fighting. It was coming home and watching everyone pretend it never happened." She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Frank had carried his war home the way they all did, in the silences between words, in the way he startled at loud noises in the nights. He woke up speaking Vietnamese to people who weren't there. But he had also carried something else home, something that mattered. The truth. In 1985, when most men looked the other way, Frank Sullivan had stood in front of a federal prosecutor and told the truth about what he had seen. Not in Vietnam. Here, in Montana. Corruption that ran so deep it had roots in 3 states and branches in Washington. He had testified against a district attorney named Thomas Crane, a man who wore his reputation like armor and his authority like a weapon. Frank had stripped both away in 4 hours of sworn testimony. 2 weeks later, Thomas Crane drove his car off a mountain road. The official report said, accident. Frank never believed it. Dorothy wasn't sure what she believed, except that telling the truth had cost her husband something he never got back. Peace, maybe. Or the illusion of safety. "Dorothy." The voice came from behind her. She recognized it before she turned. A mother always does. Robert Sullivan stood in the doorway of the ward, and for a moment she saw him as he had been. 20 years old, marine dress blues, standing at attention in their living room before his first deployment. Bobby, her son, her only child. The pride in Frank's eyes that day had been something profound, something unspoken, but understood between men who wore the uniform. Now Bobby was 54, graying at the temples, lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many suns in too many deserts. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt that hung loose on a frame that had once been solid muscle and was now just lean. There was something in his posture that hadn't been there the last time she saw him. Defeat. Bobby. He stepped into the room and she noticed he was carrying a folder. Manila. The kind lawyers used. The kind that held documents that changed things. "Mom, we need to talk." She set down the blanket she had been folding. "Here." Somewhere private. They walked to the hospital cafeteria. It was empty at this hour, the breakfast rush over the lunch crowd not yet arrived. The smell of industrial coffee and disinfectant mixed in the air. They sat at a table by the window. Outside, the Montana sky stretched forever. The kind of blue that looked like freedom and felt like emptiness. Bobby set the folder on the table but didn't open it. "How have you been?" he asked. "The same." "Still at the church?" She nodded. After Frank died and the medical bills came and the insurance ran out, she had sold the house. Or rather, Bobby had sold it. She had signed the papers because she trusted him, and because the numbers he showed her made it clear there was no other choice. The money had gone to pay off Frank's debts. What remained went into an account Bobby managed. She lived in a spare room behind the administrative office of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. The pastor's wife was kind. The room was small. It was temporary. 2 years later, it was still temporary. "Mom, Bobby stopped, started again. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to be angry." "Are you sick?" "No, nothing like that." He opened the folder. Inside were more papers, bank statements, legal notices, foreclosure documents. "I lost everything." The words hung in the air between them. "The business?" she asked. "Gone? The house? Sarah's car? Everything?" His voice was flat the way soldiers talked about casualties. Just facts. No emotion allowed or it would all come apart. "I made bad investments. Trusted the wrong people. By the time I realized how deep I was, it was too late." Dorothy looked at the papers without touching them. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the bank is taking the house. Our house. The one you and Dad built." She felt something tighten in her chest. "You sold that 3 years ago." "I told you I sold it." Bobby's jaw clenched. "I mortgaged it. Took out a loan using it as collateral. The money went into the business. The business failed. And now it's gone." "Yes." Silence settled over the table. Outside, a group of nurses walked past the window, laughing about something. The sound was distant, unreal. "There's something else," Bobby said quietly. "Something I should have told you 2 years ago." Dorothy waited. I didn't just make bad investments, Mom. I was blackmailed. The word landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward, touching everything. By who? Bobby reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was creased, worn from being folded and unfolded too many times. He slid it across the table. Dorothy picked it up. The photo showed Bobby in desert camouflage, younger, harder. He was standing next to 3 other Marines. They were smiling. Behind them, smoke rose from a building. It looked like any of 10,000 photos from any of a dozen wars, except for the date stamp in the corner. March 17th, 2003. And the handwriting on the back. Friendly fire incident. 4 civilians. Covered up by CO. Sullivan knew. Dorothy looked up at her son. What is this? Iraq. We were clearing a sector outside Fallujah. Got bad intel. Thought the building was an insurgent safe house. By the time we realized, he stopped. Took a breath. 4 people died, Mom. A family. And our commanding officer told us it never happened. Ordered us to report it as enemy combatants. Said if we didn't, we'd all face court-martial for disobeying orders in a combat zone. Did you know they were civilians? Not before, but after, yes. We all did. And we stayed quiet, because we were told that was the order. His hands were shaking slightly. 3 years ago, someone sent me this photo, along with a letter. It said if I didn't sell your house and disappear, the equity they would send copies to the Marine Corps, the media, everyone. They would destroy what was left of my career. Destroy my family. Destroy everything. Dorothy set the photo down carefully. So you sold my home to protect yourself, to protect all of us. Sarah, the kids, you. If this came out, it wouldn't just be me. They would come after everyone. Who sent it? I don't know. The envelope had no return address. The letter wasn't signed. But whoever it was knew details only someone in the unit would know. Or someone with access to JAG files. Dorothy stood slowly. Her knees protested. Everything protested these days. You should have told me. I know. You should have asked. Would you have said yes? She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had been her baby, her boy, her pride. Who had followed his father into uniform and carried his father's honor like a standard. Who had broken that honor to protect a lie and then compounded it by breaking her trust to protect himself. No, she said finally. I wouldn't have, but you should have asked anyway. She left the folder on the table and walked out of the cafeteria. Behind her, she heard Bobby call her name, but she didn't stop. She walked through the hospital corridors, past the veterans in their beds, past the nurses at their stations, past Charlie Ness, who watched her go with knowing eyes. Outside, the Montana sky was still impossibly blue. The parking lot was half empty. Her car, a 20-year-old sedan that Frank had kept running through. Sheer stubbornness and spare parts sat in the far corner. She got in, started the engine, and drove. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to move. The months that followed blurred together in the way time does when you're just surviving. Dorothy continued volunteering at the hospital. She continued living in the room behind the church office. She continued going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly like a performance for an audience that had stopped watching. Bobby called every week. She didn't answer. He sent letters. She didn't open them. Sarah, his wife, tried once to visit. Dorothy was polite, distant, and Sarah didn't come back. The grandchildren sent her a card at Christmas. She put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again. Frank's voice lived in her head during those months. Not the way he sounded at the end, weak and gasping. The way he had sounded in the beginning, strong, certain. Dot, you can't carry other people's weight for them. They have to choose to pick it up themselves. She understood what he meant now. Spring turned to summer. Summer turned to fall. The leaves in Montana came down like surrender, covering the ground in gold and rust. Dorothy was in her room one evening reading by the light of a single lamp when Pastor Margaret knocked on the door. "Dorothy, there's something for you." She opened the door. The pastor held out a flyer, the cheap photocopied kind that showed up in grocery stores and community centers. "County auction," it read in bold letters. "Forfeited federal property. Saturday, October 12th, 10 a.m. "Why are you showing me this?" Dorothy asked. "I don't know," Margaret said honestly. "I saw it and thought of you. Sometimes the things we don't understand are the things we're supposed to pay attention to." Dorothy took the flyer. That night she read it 3 times. Most of the items were unremarkable. Seized vehicles, abandoned lots, storage units full of other people's forgotten belongings. But near the bottom, one listing caught her eye. Item 47. Underground residential structure location. Rural Route 9 coordinates provided. Condition unknown. No access verified. Sold as is. No refunds. She read it a 4th time, then a 5th. Something about it pulled at her. Maybe it was the mystery of it. Maybe it was the fact that no one else would want it. Maybe it was that word, residential. A home buried and forgotten, waiting for someone to remember it, mattered. Saturday morning came cold and clear. Dorothy drove to the county administration building where the auction was being held. The parking lot was half full. Inside, 40 or 50 people sat in folding chairs arranged in rows. Most looked like dealers' flippers, people who made their living buying cheap and selling high. A few looked like desperate people hoping for a bargain that might change their luck. She sat in the back row. The auctioneer was a thin man in his 60s with reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He moved through the items with practiced efficiency. A Ford pickup with a blown transmission went for $800. A plot of land with no road access went for $2,000. A storage unit full of old furniture went for $50. No one seemed particularly excited. This was business, routine, forgettable. Then he reached item 47. "Next up," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Underground residential structure located at Rural Route 9. Coordinates are in the information packet. Property has been sealed for approximately 40 years. No recent access verified. Structural integrity unknown. Sold as is, all sales final. No refunds or returns. A murmur went through the crowd. Not interest. Amusement. Starting bid is $5. Someone laughed. Then someone else. The auctioneer waited, looking around the room with the weary patience of someone who had seen it all before. Any takers at $5? More laughter. A man in the third row turned to his neighbor. Probably a septic tank. Or a meth lab, the neighbor replied. Could be a grave, someone else offered. The laughter grew louder. The auctioneer sighed. Going once at $5. Dorothy raised her hand. The room didn't go silent. That would suggest people cared enough to stop talking. Instead, the laughter just shifted direction. Toward her. The auctioneer blinked. Ma'am, you're bidding $5 for an underground structure we cannot guarantee is safe, accessible, or even intact. Yes. And you understand the property is sold as is with no refunds. I understand. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around to look at her. Honey, at your age, you sure you want to be crawling into holes in the ground? I wasn't planning to crawl, Dorothy said calmly. A man near the front, 40-something, with the cocky smile of someone who thought he was funnier than he was, spoke up loud enough for everyone to hear. She's buying herself a burial plot. Getting a head start. The room erupted in laughter. Real laughter now. Comfortable. Cruel in the way people are when they think the target won't fight back. Dorothy didn't stand. Didn't raise her voice. Just waited for the noise to die down. When it did, she looked directly at the man who had spoken. I've buried better men than you'll ever be, she said quietly. And not one of them died laughing. The room went silent then. Actual silence. The kind that comes when someone draws a line and everyone realizes they're on the wrong side of it. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Any other bids? No one spoke. Sold to the lady in the back. $5. Dorothy stood and made her way to the front desk. People watched her pass. Some looked embarrassed. Most looked away. She didn't care about either. The clerk handed her a folder. It was thin, yellowed at the edges, the kind of paperwork that had been filed and forgotten. Inside were 3 things. A deed with her name written in by hand. A Xeroxed map with coordinates marked in red. And a key. The key was small, old, the kind that opened padlocks. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, like it carried weight that had nothing to do with metal. For what it's worth, the clerk said quietly, no one's claimed that property in over 40 years. The state took possession in 1987. It's been on the books ever since. Why auction it now? He shrugged. Budget cuts. They're clearing out old inventory. Honestly, I'm surprised it's sold at all. So am I, Dorothy said. She drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. That night, she spread the map out on her small table and studied the coordinates. Route 9 ran north out of town into wilderness. The marked location was miles from anything. No nearby houses, no towns, just empty land in the mountains beyond. She folded the map carefully and put it back in the folder. Then she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She picked up her phone and scrolled through the contacts until she found Bobby's number. Her thumb hovered over it for a long moment. Then she pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, I need your help," she said. The drive to Route 9 took 40 minutes. Dorothy followed the map, turning off the main road onto a gravel path that barely qualified as a road. Her car rattled over ruts and rocks. Trees pressed in from both sides. After 3 miles, the path ended in a clearing. She parked and got out. The silence was immediate and total. No traffic, no voices. Just wind moving through grass and the distant call of a hawk. According to the coordinates, she was standing on top of her $5 purchase. The clearing was roughly an acre of wild grass and scrub brush. Nothing obviously artificial. No structures visible above ground. She walked slowly, methodically, the way she had been trained to search a field hospital for wounded, looking for something that didn't belong. It took 20 minutes to find it, a patch of metal half buried beneath weeds and dirt, rectangular, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet. She knelt down and brushed away the accumulated debris. Rust had eaten at the edges, but the center was still solid. There was a handle recessed into the surface, and next to it a keyhole. Dorothy pulled the key from her pocket. It slid into the lock smoothly as if the mechanism had been waiting. She turned it. Something clicked deep inside. The handle was stiff but functional. She gripped it with both hands and pulled. The hatch resisted at first, then gave way suddenly. It swung up and open, revealing a dark square and the top of a concrete staircase descending into shadow. Cool air rose from below. Not the musty smell of decay, not the damp smell of earth. Just clean, still air that felt wrong for something that had been sealed 40 years. Dorothy stood at the edge and looked down. 20 steps, maybe more. Concrete walls on either side. A metal railing bolted into the left wall. At the bottom, darkness. She had a flashlight in her car. She retrieved it along with her phone, though she doubted she would get signal out here. Then she returned to the hatch and stood looking down again. Every reasonable instinct told her to leave, to close the hatch locket, drive back to town, and forget this place existed. She was 80 years old. She lived in a room behind a church. She had no business descending into abandoned underground structures in the middle of nowhere. But then she had had no business volunteering for Vietnam either. No business marrying a man who would rather tell the truth than stay safe. No business surviving this long when so many others hadn't. "All right, Frank," she said quietly. "Let's see what I bought." She turned on the flashlight and started down. The temperature dropped immediately. Not cold, but noticeably cooler than the surface. The concrete steps were solid beneath her feet. No cracks, no crumbling. 20 steps. Then a landing. Then a corridor. She swept the flashlight beam ahead. The corridor was narrow, maybe 6 feet wide, with concrete walls and a ceiling lined with pipes and electrical conduit. Everything was coated in dust, but beneath the dust she could see the workmanship. Professional, military grade. Motion sensors along the ceiling caught the beam of her light. Something clicked. Then, one by one, lights began to flicker on. Fluorescent tubes, old but functional, casting harsh white light down the corridor. Dorothy stood very still. The lights hadn't worked in 40 years. Shouldn't work. But they did. She moved forward slowly. The corridor extended about 30 feet, then opened into a larger space. As she entered, more lights activated automatically. She found herself standing in what could only be described as a living area. There was a kitchen along one wall. Metal counters as sink cabinets. No rust. No decay. Just dust. The floor was concrete but clean. Against the opposite wall, a table and 4 chairs. Beyond that, a doorway leading to another room. She checked the sink, turned the handle. Water coughed out, brown at first, then clearing. She let it run for a moment, then turned it off. Functional plumbing, in a place that had been sealed for 4 decades. This wasn't a shelter. Shelters were basic, temporary. This was something else. Something designed for long-term occupancy. Something designed to keep people alive and hidden. She moved through the space methodically. The doorway off the main room led to a bedroom. A single bed neatly made, a small dresser. Everything preserved beneath layers of dust like a museum exhibit. Another door revealed a bathroom. Toilet, shower, sink. All functional. A third door opened into a storage room. Metal shelves lined the walls, most empty now, but a few still holding sealed containers. She examined one. Military MREs. The packaging was faded but intact. The date stamp read 1984. She set it down carefully and continued her inventory. Radio equipment in one corner, outdated but professional. A generator in a separate enclosure, diesel-powered with fuel tanks that were still half full. Air filtration system in the ceiling, the vents clean, the motors silent but ready. Someone had built this place with meticulous care. Someone with resources. Someone who expected people to live here not for days but for months. Maybe years. She returned to the main room and sat at the table. Dust rose around her in a gentle cloud. The lights hummed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, the generator kicked on automatically, responding to the power draw. After a moment, she felt cool air moving. The ventilation system activating. Dorothy looked around the space with the analytical eye she had developed in field hospitals, assessing, prioritizing, understanding. This wasn't a shelter built for war. Those were crude, desperate. This was a safe house, built for witness protection, built to hide someone from people who wanted them dead. Her eyes fell on the wall near the kitchen. A calendar hung there, its pages yellowed. She stood and walked over to it. The top page showed June 1985. Someone had circled the 14th in red pen. Tomorrow's date, the 15th, was blank. Beneath the calendar, a message board held a single note card, its edges curled with age. The handwriting was precise masculine. June 14th. Extraction scheduled 0600. All personnel ready. Subject secured. Protocol maintained. Subject. Not person. Not witness. Subject. Dorothy reached up and carefully removed the note card. On the back, more writing. If you find this and I'm not here, protocol failed. Do not surface. They are still looking. No signature, no name. Just a warning from someone who had been here when the lights still mattered, when the calendar still counted days, when tomorrow was supposed to mean something. She turned the card over in her hands, then slipped it into her pocket. As she did, she noticed something else. The wall behind the calendar looked slightly different. The texture was wrong. She ran her fingers along it and felt a seam, a panel. She applied pressure to one edge. It clicked. The panel swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a recess in the wall about 2 feet square. Inside, a metal box. The box was the size of a briefcase made of brushed steel, sealed with a combination lock. No note, no instructions. Just the box waiting in the dark for someone to find it. Dorothy lifted it carefully. It was heavy. She carried it to the table and set it down, then examined the lock. 6 digits. Thousands of possible combinations. She tried a few obvious ones. All zeros. The date on the calendar. Nothing worked. She left the box on the table and continued exploring. There had to be more. Places like this always had more. Another corridor led off the main living space, narrower, darker. She followed it. At the end, a door. Not metal like the hatch above. Wood. Smooth, finished, completely out of place in this concrete bunker. She approached it slowly. The wood was dark, polished, untouched by the dust that covered everything else. There was no handle on the outside, just a recessed grip and a small brass plate. She leaned closer to read the engraving. In memory of those who stood when others ran. Her hand moved to the grip without conscious thought. She pulled. The door didn't open. Locked. She looked for a keyhole, but found none. Whatever was behind this door, it wasn't meant to be accessed easily. She stepped back and stood looking at it. The wood was warm to the touch. She could feel it through her palm. In a place where everything was cool concrete and cold metal, this door felt alive. A sound from above made her freeze. Footsteps. On the surface, moving toward the hatch. Dorothy turned and moved back through the corridor, through the living space to the base of the stairs. She turned off her flashlight and listened. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, muffled by distance but clear enough. Mrs. Sullivan, male, unfamiliar. Mrs. Sullivan, I know you're down there. I saw your car. She didn't answer. Years of medical training had taught her when to speak and when to stay silent. This was a staying silent moment. My name is William Crane. I represent Crane Development Group. I'd like to speak with you about your recent purchase. Crane. The name hit her like a physical blow. Thomas Crane. The district attorney Frank had testified against. The man who died 2 weeks later. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to make you an offer. A generous one. Dorothy climbed the stairs slowly, quietly. When she reached the top, she could see him. He stood about 10 feet from the hatch, hands in his pockets, wearing an expensive suit that looked absurd in the middle of a wilderness clearing. He was mid-40s, fit with the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. She emerged from the hatch fully and stood facing him. "Mr. Crane." He smiled. It was the practiced smile of someone who negotiated for a living. "You know my name. I know your family name. Your father was Thomas Crane, District Attorney, 1985. The smile didn't fade, but something shifted behind his eyes. "You've done your research. I didn't have to. My husband testified against your father 40 years ago." Now the smile disappeared entirely. For a moment, something raw showed through. Anger. Old anger that had been waiting a long time. "Frank Sullivan," Crane said quietly. "Yes, I know who your husband was. I know what he did. He told the truth. He destroyed my father. Your father destroyed himself. Frank just made sure people knew about it." Crane took a step closer. Dorothy didn't move. She had faced down commanders and bureaucrats and men with guns. A developer in the wilderness didn't frighten her. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm not here to debate ancient history. I'm here to make you a very simple offer. $500,000 for this property. Cash. Immediate transfer. No questions, no complications. For a $5 hole in the ground, for what's underneath it." The admission hung in the air between them. "You know what's down there," Dorothy said. "I have a good idea. My father's files mention this location. Vaguely. But enough to know it matters. Enough to know it's worth considerably more than $500,000 to the right buyer. And you're the right buyer. I'm the only buyer. Mrs. Sullivan, I've been looking for this place for 20 years. Waiting for it to surface. Watching the county records. When it went to auction, I arranged to be there. But I wasn't expecting competition." He smiled again, colder this time. "I certainly wasn't expecting you. Life is full of surprises, indeed. Which is why I'm here now, making this offer while it's still an offer. $500,000 is more money than you've probably seen in your life. It would solve a lot of problems. Give you security. Comfort. Everything a woman your age needs." Dorothy thought about the room behind the church, the medical bills, the house Bobby had sold, the 2 years of being temporary. "Mr. Crane," she said slowly, "I spent 2 years living in other people's spaces, being grateful for rooms that were never mine, staying quiet so no one would remember I was there. I spent 2 years being erased a little bit every day. And then yesterday I bought something for $5. Something no one else wanted. Something I could put my name on." She paused, meeting his eyes. "So, no. Your money doesn't solve my problems. It just makes them someone else's." Crane's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Is it? He pulled out his phone, tapped something, then held it up so she could see the screen. A legal document. She couldn't read the details from where she stood, but she could see the official seals. In exactly 30 days, Crane said this property reverts to state jurisdiction under abandoned federal property statutes. The auction sale is conditional on verification of structural safety and legal clear title, both of which require state approval. And I can promise you, Mrs. Sullivan, the state will not approve. How can you promise that? His smile returned. Because my uncle is the county commissioner. My cousin is the sheriff. My law firm handles contracts for half the state offices in Montana. When I say the state won't approve, I mean I won't let them approve. Dorothy said nothing. 30 days, Crane continued. Then this place goes back on the market, and next time I'll be the winning bidder. You can take $500,000 now and walk away with dignity. Or you can fight me for a month, lose, and walk away with nothing. There's a third option, which is I stay, I fight, and I win. Crane laughed, actually laughed. Mrs. Sullivan, I admire your spirit. I really do. But you're 80 years old. You live in a room at a church. You have no money, no resources, no support. You can't possibly think you can fight this. You'd be surprised what people can do when they stop worrying about losing what they've already lost. His laugh faded. For the first time, she saw uncertainty flicker across his face, just for a moment. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder. I'll be in touch, he said. Think about my offer. Think carefully, because in 30 days this conversation ends, and I don't make offers twice. He walked back to his car, a black SUV parked beyond her sedan. He didn't look back. The engine started and he drove away, dust rising behind him. Dorothy stood in the clearing, listening to the silence return. Then she pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She would have to drive partway back toward town to make the call. She climbed back down into the bunker one more time. The lights were still on. The space still waiting. She looked at the metal box on the table, the locked door at the end of the corridor, the calendar frozen in June 1985. All right, she said to the empty room. You wanted someone to find you. I found you. Now let's figure out what you're worth dying for. She climbed back up, closed the hatch, locked it, and got in her car. 5 miles down Route 9, her phone finally showed a single bar of signal. She pulled over and scrolled through her contacts, found the number she needed. Bobby answered on the first ring. Mom, are you okay? I need your help, she said. One last mission. What kind of mission? Dorothy looked back toward the wilderness, toward the hatch hidden in the grass, toward whatever truth was waiting beneath the earth. The kind your father would have volunteered for, she said. There was a long pause. Then Bobby's voice, quieter now, carrying weight. It hadn't carried in 2 years. Tell me where you are. Route 9, north of town. I'll send you coordinates. Bobby. Yeah. Bring your service weapon. Another pause. Longer this time. Copy that. She ended the call and sat in the car watching the sun drop toward the mountains. The sky turned gold, then orange, then the deep blue that comes just before dark. In Vietnam, this had been her favorite time of day. The quiet hour between casualties. The moment when you could believe just for a little while that the fighting was over. But it never was. Fighting just changed shape, changed location. Moved from jungles to deserts to wilderness clearings in Montana, where old men's sins waited in concrete tombs for someone brave enough or foolish enough to dig them up. Dorothy started the engine and drove back toward town. Behind her in the fading light, the hatch waited. The bunker waited. The truth waited. And for the first time in 2 years, Dorothy Sullivan wasn't running from anything. She was moving toward something. Toward whatever her $5 had bought. Toward whatever William Crane was willing to pay $500,000 to bury again. Toward the last stand she hadn't known she was waiting for. Bobby arrived at dawn. Dorothy heard his truck before she saw it. The engine's rumble cutting through the early morning stillness. She was already awake, sitting in the church office with Frank's old field jacket draped over her shoulders, and the contents of the metal box spread across the desk. She hadn't been able to open the box, not yet. But she had spent the night thinking about what might be inside, about what William Crane was willing to pay $500,000 to bury, about what her husband had testified to 40 years ago that still mattered enough to threaten. The knock came soft but firm. She opened the door. Bobby stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a canvas jacket. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from not sleeping, from lying awake, turning over questions that have no good answers. But he also looked focused, alert. The way he must have looked before missions in the desert. "Mom, come in." He stepped inside and she closed the door. For a moment they just stood there. Mother and son, carrying 2 years of silence between them, like a weight neither knew how to set down. "I brought my sidearm," Bobby said finally, "like you asked. But, Mom, I need to know what we're walking into. Sit down." She poured coffee from the small pot she kept in the office. Black. The way Frank had drunk it. The way soldiers drank it. Bobby took the cup and sat at the desk, his eyes moving over the papers she had laid out. The deed. The map. The note card from the bunker. "You went inside?" he asked. "Yesterday, after Crane left. And it's not a shelter. It's a safe house. Federal witness protection. Built in the 80s and sealed in 1985. She sat across from him. "I think someone was supposed to testify about something your father helped prosecute. I think that person never made it to trial. And I think whatever they knew is still down there." Bobby picked up the note card, read it, set it down carefully. "Protocol failed. Do not surface. They are still looking." He looked up at her. "Who's they?" "That's what we need to find out. And Crane wants to make sure we don't." Bobby was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the coffee cup. An old habit. He used to do it before exams, before deployments, before anything that required him to make a decision he couldn't take back. Why me? He asked finally. You could call the police, the FBI, people whose job this is. Because I don't know who to trust, and because you owe me the truth about something. He met her eyes, waiting. That photo they sent you, the blackmail. Was there anything else? Anything that connects to 1985? To your father's testimony? Bobby's jaw tightened. I don't know. The letter just said if I didn't comply, they would destroy everything. It mentioned Dad once. Said he should have kept his mouth shut and maybe his family wouldn't have to pay for his mistakes. Did you keep the letter? No, I burned it. Stupid, I know, but I was scared and I wasn't thinking clearly. And it's all right. Dorothy reached across the desk and put her hand over his. We work with what we have. His hand turned under hers, gripping back. I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. For the house. For lying, for not being there when you needed me. I know. Do you forgive me? She looked at him for a long moment. This man who carried Frank's eyes and her stubbornness and wounds that went deeper than either of them knew how to heal. Ask me again when this is over, she said. They drove to the university library first. It opened at 8, and Dorothy was waiting at the door when the student assistant unlocked it. She had spent enough years as a volunteer librarian to know her way around research systems, and the Montana State Archives were comprehensive if you knew where to look. Bobby followed her to the microfilm section. She pulled up newspaper archives from 1985, starting with June. What are we looking for? Bobby asked. Context. Your father testified in May 1985 about corruption. District Attorney Thomas Crane was implicated. Crane died in June. But there has to be more. There has to be a why. She scrolled through headlines, local news, city council meetings, high school graduations. Then, June 18th, 1985. A headline that made her stop. Star witness disappears before major organized crime trial. Bobby leaned closer, reading over her shoulder. The article was short but dense. A woman named Anna Volkov, described as a key witness in a federal racketeering case, had vanished from protective custody 3 days before she was scheduled to testify. The trial, which was expected to expose deep corruption in Montana state government, had been postponed indefinitely. FBI officials declined to comment. District Attorney Thomas Crane, who was coordinating with federal prosecutors, expressed confidence that Volkov would be found. What was she testifying about? Bobby asked. Dorothy scrolled down. A follow-up article from 2 days later provided more details. Anna Volkov had been an accountant for the Volkov crime family run by her husband, Dmitry Volkov. When Dmitry was killed in a rival gang dispute, Anna had approached federal authorities with what she called insurance. A complete financial ledger documenting payoffs, bribes, and money laundering schemes that implicated dozens of officials across 3 states. She kept records, Dorothy murmured. Every payment, every name, every transaction. And then she disappeared. Dorothy continued scrolling. June 20th. Federal investigation stalled without key witness. June 25th. Prosecutor Crane, we will find Volkov dead or alive. July 2nd. Missing witness case goes cold. Then July 15th. District Attorney Thomas Crane dies in single vehicle accident. The article was brief. Crane had apparently lost control of his vehicle on a mountain road late at night. No other cars involved. Investigators found no evidence of mechanical failure or foul play. The case was closed as accidental death. 2 weeks after the last article about Volkov, Bobby said quietly, and 6 weeks after your father testified that Crane was on the take. They sat in silence for a moment, the microfilm projector humming softly. Around them, students worked at computers, oblivious to the 40-year-old mystery unfolding in the archives. So Volkov had evidence, Bobby said. Crane was trying to find her. Dad testified that Crane was corrupt. Crane died. Volkov was never found. And now Crane's son wants that bunker. Which means the evidence is still there. Or he thinks it is. The metal box. Dorothy nodded. We need to get it open. But first we need to know more about who built that safe house and who was supposed to protect Anna Volkov. She navigated to a different database. Federal Bureau of Investigation field office records were harder to access, but retirement records were public. She searched for agents assigned to Montana in 1985. The list was long. She filtered by specialization, witness protection, organized crime. The list shortened. Then she added a geographic filter. Agents who had taken early retirement or left the Bureau between 1985 and 1990. One name appeared. James Keller. Special agent. Assigned to the Helena Field Office 1980 to 1985. Specialization witness security. Status retired 1986. Current location listed as deceased 1987. Deceased, Bobby said. Dead end. But Dorothy was staring at the date. 1987. 2 years after Anna Volkov disappeared. She opened another search window and pulled up death records. James Keller. Found the entry. Died March 12, 1987. Fishing accident. Body recovered from Flathead Lake. Closed casket funeral. Cremated. Convenient timing, Bobby said. Very convenient. Dorothy sat back thinking. A witness who disappeared. An FBI agent who died 2 years later. A prosecutor who drove off a mountain. And a bunker that stayed sealed for 40 years with a note that said, "Protocol failed." What if Keller didn't die? She said slowly. Bobby looked at her. What do you mean? What if he faked his death, went into hiding, the note in the bunker said they're still looking? Not they were. They are. Present tense. Mom, if he's alive, he'd be mid-70s by now. How do we even begin to find someone who's been hiding for almost 40 years? Dorothy turned back to the computer. We look for someone who didn't want to be found but couldn't completely disappear. Someone with a background that would let them live off the grid but still access certain resources. She searched veteran databases. Korean War. Montana residents. Combat veterans who would have had the skills to survive alone. The list was manageable. about 200 names. She cross-referenced with property records, looking for someone who bought land in cash in remote areas after 1987. It took an hour. Bobby brought more coffee. Dorothy's eyes began to ache from staring at the screen. Then she found it. Michael Torres purchased 40 acres in rural Idaho in 1988. Paid in cash. No mortgage. No phone line. No utilities hookup. Just land and whatever Torres built on it himself. Torres was listed as one of the agents on the Volkov case, Dorothy said, pulling up the original FBI records. He supposedly died in 1985, shot during a protection detail gone wrong. Body never recovered. Let me guess, closed casket funeral. No funeral at all, listed as killed in action. Memorial service only. Bobby leaned back in his chair. So, Torres dies. Keller dies. Both deaths convenient. Both around the same time, Anna Volkov vanishes. Or, Dorothy said, Torres and Keller are the same person. Torres dies. Keller takes his identity, then Keller dies and becomes someone else entirely. Someone who bought land in Idaho and disappeared. That's a lot of maybes, Mom. It is, but it's the only trail we have. They left the library at noon. Bobby wanted to eat, but Dorothy wasn't hungry. She was thinking about the locked wooden door in the bunker, about the metal box she couldn't open, about the man who might still be alive in Idaho, carrying secrets that had already killed at least 3 people. We drive to Idaho, she said. Now. Bobby's truck had 4-wheel drive and enough fuel to make the trip. They stopped at the church so Dorothy could pack a small bag, then headed north. The Idaho border was 3 hours away. The address she had found for Michael Torres was another 2 hours beyond that into wilderness that made Montana look suburban. Bobby drove. Dorothy watched the landscape roll past. Mountains gave way to high desert. Desert gave way to forest. The radio picked up nothing but static after the first hour. Tell me about Iraq, she said. Bobby's hands tightened on the wheel. What do you want to know? The truth. All of it. Not the version you told the Corps. The version you tell yourself at 3 in the morning. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Dorothy thought he might not answer. Then he started talking. We were clearing a neighborhood outside Fallujah, house to house. Intel said there was an insurgent cell using one of the buildings as a weapons cache. We breached at dawn. Standard entry. Flashbang's room clearing the whole drill. He paused. Dorothy waited. There were 4 people inside. A man, a woman, 2 kids. Not insurgents, not armed. Just a family who happened to be in the wrong place when bad intelligence put a target on their door. We realized it about 3 seconds after we were inside. By then, the shooting had already started. Confused. Chaotic. Someone fired, everyone fired. And when it was over, his voice cracked slightly. When it was over, they were dead. All 4 of them. The woman was holding the younger kid, trying to shield him. It didn't matter. Dorothy reached over and put her hand on his arm. He kept driving, eyes fixed forward. Our CO arrived 10 minutes later, saw what happened, told us it was an unfortunate mistake, but one that happened in war. Told us the family were probable insurgent sympathizers anyway. Told us to report it as enemy combatants engaged and neutralized. Told us if we didn't, he would make sure we all face court-martial for firing on civilians. So we did. We lied. We wrote the reports. We buried it. Until someone dug it up. Until someone sent me that photo and told me the truth was about to cost me everything. Do you know who sent it? No. But whoever it was knew details only someone in the unit would know. Or someone with access to the real after-action reports. Dorothy processed this. Your CO, where is he now? Senator, Montana State Senate. Been there for 12 years. Name, Richard Porter. Dorothy pulled out her phone. No signal. She made a mental note to look up Richard Porter when they had internet again. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The road got worse as they went deeper into Idaho. Paved became gravel. Gravel became dirt. Dirt became 2 ruts in the grass that might generously be called a trail. Bobby's GPS lost signal. They navigated by the old-fashioned method, paper map and dead reckoning. The coordinates Dorothy had found led them to a gate. Just a simple cattle gate across a dirt track with a sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing." Bobby stopped the truck. You sure about this? No. But we're here. They got out. The gate wasn't locked. Bobby opened it and they drove through. Another mile brought them to a cabin. It was small log construction, well maintained but basic. Solar panels on the roof. A rain collection system. A garden plot showing recent tending. No vehicles visible. No obvious signs of occupancy. Bobby reached under his jacket and checked his sidearm. Dorothy noticed but didn't comment. They approached the cabin on foot. Before they reached the porch, the door opened. The man who emerged was in his mid-70s, lean and hard, the way old soldiers got when they stayed active. He wore work clothes and boots, and he was holding a shotgun. Not aimed at them, just held, ready. That's far enough, he said. Bobby stopped. His hand moved slightly toward his weapon. Dorothy put her hand on his arm. "Mr. Torres," she called. The man's expression didn't change. "No one by that name here." Then what about James Keller? A flicker. Just a small one. But Dorothy saw it. "I think you have the wrong address, ma'am." "I don't think I do. I think you're the man who built a safe house in Montana in 1985. I think you were supposed to protect Anna Volkov. And I think protocol failed." The shotgun lowered slightly. The man stared at her for a long moment. "Who are you?" he asked. "Dorothy Sullivan. This is my son Robert. My husband was Frank Sullivan. He testified against District Attorney Thomas Crane in May 1985. Something changed in the man's face. Recognition. Maybe respect. "Frank Sullivan," he said quietly. I remember that name. He was one of the few who stood up when it mattered. Then you know we're not here to cause you trouble. The man considered this. Then he set the shotgun against the porch rail and gestured toward the door. You'd better come inside. The interior of the cabin was sparse but organized. Military precision. Everything had its place. A wood stove in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves lined with books, a cot in the back, no photographs, no personal items, nothing that would identify the occupant. The man poured water from a jug into 3 cups and handed them out. Then he sat at the table and gestured for them to do the same. My name is James Keller, he said, though I've gone by other names. Torres, Henderson, Smith. Doesn't much matter anymore. I've been dead for 40 years. Speaking to you now is the first time I've broken cover since 1985. Why break it now? Dorothy asked. Because if you found me, it means you found the safe house. And if you found the safe house, it means someone's looking again. He met her eyes. William Crane. Yes. Keller nodded slowly. His father's son. I wondered when he'd come. Tell us about Anna Volkov, Bobby said. Keller was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was reading from a report filed decades ago. Anna Volkov was an accountant for the Dmitry Volkov organization. When her husband died, she came to us with an offer. She had kept detailed records of every illegal transaction the family had made for 10 years. Payments to judges, bribes to law enforcement, money laundering through legitimate businesses. She said she would testify in exchange for immunity and protection. What kind of protection? Dorothy asked. Witness security, new identity, relocation, the full program. But Anna was smart. Smarter than we gave her credit for. She didn't trust us completely, so she held something back. The ledger itself. She told us she had it, told us she would turn it over after she testified. But until then, it was her insurance. Insurance against what? Against us deciding she was more trouble than she was worth. Against the people she was testifying against getting to her. Against anyone who might want her dead to keep her quiet. Keller paused. She was right to be paranoid. Because they did come. Who? Thomas Crane. He was working with us coordinating the state prosecution with our federal case. But he was also on Volkov's payroll. Had been for years. When he realized Anna had evidence that would destroy him, he tried to make a deal. Offered to make her disappear in exchange for the ledger. When she refused, he decided to eliminate her himself. Bobby leaned forward. But you stopped him. I tried. We moved Anna to the safe house, the one you found. My partner, Agent Michael Torres, and I were the only ones who knew the location. We thought we were safe. We thought we had time. His voice hardened. We were wrong. What happened? June 14th, 1985. The night before Anna was scheduled to testify. Torres and I were running final security checks. Crane showed up with 2 men. I don't know how he found us. Maybe he followed us. Maybe he had someone inside the bureau feeding him information. It doesn't matter. He came. He wanted Anna. And he wanted that ledger. Keller stopped. His hands, weathered and scarred, tightened around his water cup. Torres refused to tell him where Anna was hidden. Crane shot him. Execution style. Right there in the main room. I was in the back corridor. Heard the shot. Knew I had two choices. Fight and die. Or run and maybe live long enough to matter later. You ran, Dorothy said. Not a judgment. A statement. I ran. Got Anna out through the emergency exit. Drove her as far as Seattle. Put her on a boat heading north. Told her to disappear and never come back. Then I came back here. Buried Torres in the bunker. Sealed it. Made it look like protocol had failed and everyone involved was dead or missing. Then I faked my own death and vanished. Why? Bobby asked. Why not go to the FBI report, Crane? Well, because I didn't know how deep it went. Crane was connected. Powerful. If he had people inside the bureau going through official channels would just get me killed. So I waited. Watched. Kept my head down and hoped that one day someone would find that place and understand what it meant. Dorothy absorbed this. Did Anna have the ledger with her when you put her on that boat? Keller shook his head. No. She was smart to the end. She hid it before we moved her to the safe house. Told me it was somewhere safe. Somewhere no one would think to look. I asked her where. She smiled and said insurance only works if the other person doesn't know what you have. So the ledger is still hidden. If she didn't take it with her, yes. And Crane knows this. Crane's son knows. I'm sure his father told him before he died. Probably spent his last years obsessing over it. Where is the ledger? Who has it? What will it cost me if it surfaces? And now the son carries that same fear. Dorothy stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Idaho wilderness stretched empty and endless. Somewhere, in that vastness, Anna Volkov had vanished 40 years ago with secrets that still had the power to destroy. What was in the metal box? She asked. Keller looked up sharply. You found the vault. Yes, locked. 6-digit combination. For the first time, something like hope crossed Keller's face. Then Torres got it secured before Crane killed him. The box contains recordings, tapes of conversations Anna had with various officials, evidence in her own words, names, dates, amounts, everything she was going to testify to. Can they be used? If you can get them into the right hands, but you'll need the combination. Do you have it? Keller stood and moved to a shelf. He pulled down a book, flipped to a specific page, and removed a slip of paper tucked inside. He handed it to Dorothy. 6 numbers, 061485. June 14th, 1985, Dorothy said. The last day anyone tried to do the right thing and lived to regret it. They left Idaho as the sun was setting. Bobby drove fast, pushing the truck harder than he should have on the rough roads. Dorothy sat in the passenger seat with the combination memorized and Keller's final words running through her mind. If you go after this, they'll come after you. Crane has resources, connections. You're one old woman with a dead husband's reputation and a son carrying his own guilt. They'll destroy you. She had looked at him. This man who had hidden for 40 years. This man who had saved one life and lost his own in the process. Then I'll make sure I matter before they do. They reached the bunker after midnight. Bobby parked off the road, and they approached on foot with flashlights. The hatch was undisturbed. Dorothy unlocked it and they descended. The lights flickered on automatically. The space looked exactly as she had left it, except for one thing. The metal box was gone. Bobby saw it the same moment she did. The empty space on the table where the box had been. He pulled his sidearm and moved through the bunker, systematically clearing rooms. Dorothy stayed in the main area, her mind racing. Someone had been here. Someone who knew about the box. Someone who had a key. Or knew how to bypass the hatch lock. Bobby returned. Clear. No one here now. Crane. Has to be. But then Dorothy noticed something else. A piece of paper on the table, folded once, her name written on the outside in precise handwriting. She opened it. Mrs. Sullivan, 72 hours. Sell or disappear like Anna. The box is gone. The evidence is gone. You have nothing left to fight with. Take my offer while it's still on the table. William Crane. Dorothy read it twice. Then she handed it to Bobby. He broke in, took the box, left a threat. Bobby's jaw clenched. We should call the police and tell them what that someone stole evidence from a bunker I bought for $5. Evidence of crimes from 40 years ago, involving people most of whom are dead. So what do we do? Dorothy walked to the corridor, to the locked wooden door at the end. She stood in front of it, her hand on the warm wood, her mind working through possibilities. Keller said Anna hid the ledger somewhere safe, somewhere no one would think to look. The box was supposed to have recordings, supporting evidence, but not the actual ledger. Right. The ledger is somewhere else, and Crane thinks it's here. Dorothy ran her fingers along the edge of the door. The wood was seamless, perfect. She pressed against it experimentally. Nothing. Help me, she said. Bobby joined her. Together they examined every inch of the door, looking for a seam, a button, a hidden mechanism. There had to be something. Doors this unusual didn't exist without reason. It was Bobby who found it. A small indentation in the wood near the bottom, almost invisible. He pressed it. Something clicked. The door swung inward. What lay beyond was not a room. It was a corridor. Narrow. Descending. Steps carved into bedrock leading down into darkness that the bunker's lights didn't reach. Dorothy and Bobby looked at each other. Anna didn't just hide the ledger, Dorothy said slowly. She built a vault for it below the safe house, where even her protectors wouldn't know. They descended. 20 steps, 30. The temperature dropped. The air grew stale. At the bottom, a small chamber, maybe 10 feet square, carved entirely from rock. And covering every surface carved directly into the stone were names, hundreds of them, cut into the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Each name followed by dates and dollar amounts. Legislators, judges, police chiefs, FBI agents, military officers. Each one documented with precise detail how much they took, when they took it, what they did in exchange. This was the ledger, not a book, not a file, a room. A permanent record carved into stone that couldn't be burned or stolen or destroyed without demolishing the entire structure. My God, Bobby whispered. Dorothy moved along the walls reading names. Some she recognized from Frank's testimony, some from the newspaper articles. Many she didn't know at all. Then she saw one that made her stop. Richard Porter, Captain U.S. Marine Corps. Payments received $50,000 March 2003. Service rendered incident cover-up, Fallujah sector. Bobby saw it at the same moment. The color drained from his face. That's him. That's my CO. The one who ordered us to lie. He was on Volkov's payroll, or Crane's payroll, or someone's payroll. Dorothy's mind was racing. This is why you were blackmailed. Porter is a state senator now. If this ledger became public, he would go to prison. So he threatened you to make sure you stayed quiet about the friendly fire incident. Because if that got investigated, someone might dig deeper. Might find this. Bobby stepped back from the wall like it was burning him. All this time I thought I was being blackmailed to protect myself. But I was being blackmailed to protect him. To protect all of them. Dorothy pulled out her phone. Still no signal down here. She started taking photographs anyway. Every wall, every name, every amount. The flash lit up the chamber in bursts of white light, capturing 40 years of corruption in digital permanence. She had taken maybe 20 photos when she heard it. Footsteps above them, in the main bunker. Bobby heard it too. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the stairs. They climbed quickly but quietly. At the top, Bobby peered around the doorframe. 3 men in the main room. Not Crane. Larger. Harder. The kind of men who got hired when intimidation wasn't enough. One of them was placing something against the far wall. Dorothy recognized it from her medical training. Demolition charges. Bobby pulled back his face, grim. He showed her 3 fingers, then pointed to his weapon. His expression asked the question clearly. Fight or run? Dorothy looked past him at the men, at the explosives being set, at the only exit being the stairs that led up through the hatch. She pointed down the corridor, back the way they had come. Then she gestured at the wooden door. Bobby understood. He moved back to the stone chamber. Dorothy followed. They pulled the door shut behind them. and Bobby examined it from the inside. "No lock," he whispered. "We're trapped. Look for another exit." Anna wouldn't have built a vault with only one way out. They searched the chamber by flashlight. The carved names made it hard to see details. But then Dorothy noticed something. A section of wall where the names stopped. A rectangular outline barely visible in the rock. She pushed against it. It shifted. Behind it, darkness. A tunnel. "Emergency exit," Bobby said. "Just like the main bunker." They heard voices from above, loud now. Someone calling for them to come out, offering them one chance to leave before the charges were set. Dorothy and Bobby crawled into the tunnel. It was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. They moved in darkness, Dorothy leading, Bobby following. The tunnel sloped upward gradually. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes, Dorothy saw light ahead. The tunnel opened into the woods about 200 yards from the hatch. They emerged into night air and kept moving. Behind them they heard the muffled sound of men's voices. Then silence. Then the explosion. The ground shook. Dorothy and Bobby hit the dirt instinctively. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder. When it faded, Dorothy looked back. Where the hatch had been, there was now a crater. Smoke rose from it. The bunker was gone. Collapsed. Buried under tons of earth and rock. Bobby lay next to her, breathing hard. "They think we're dead." "Good. Good." Dorothy pulled out her phone. They were far enough from the bunker now that she had a signal. Weak, but there. She pulled up the photos she had taken in the stone chamber. The names, the amounts, the evidence, all still there. Digital copies that couldn't be buried. Crane destroyed the physical evidence, she said. But he didn't know about this. And he certainly doesn't know. I documented all of it. What do we do now? Dorothy looked at her phone, then at the crater, then at her son. Now we show him what it costs to try to bury the truth twice. They walked back to Bobby's truck, staying in the tree line until they were sure no one was watching. The men who had set the charges were gone. The clearing was empty except for the smoking remains of Dorothy's $5 purchase. Bobby started the engine. "Where to?" "Helena, FBI field office. We hand this over to someone who can't ignore it." "You sure they won't just bury it again?" "No. But I'm sure if I don't try, Frank died for nothing. Torres died for nothing. And I spent $5 on a hole in the ground that won't even make a decent grave." Bobby put the truck in gear. As they pulled away, Dorothy took one last look at the destruction behind them. Somewhere under all that rubble was the stone chamber. The ledger carved in rock. Evidence that couldn't be burned or stolen. And she had the only copies that mattered. William Crane thought he had won. Thought he had eliminated the threat. Thought an 80-year-old woman with no resources and a guilty son would just disappear into the Montana wilderness like Anna Volkov had 40 years before. He was wrong. Dorothy leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying weight you're not sure you can hold. But she had held it this far. She could hold it a little longer. The Helena FBI field office sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the state capitol. Dorothy and Bobby arrived at dawn, the truck's headlights cutting through morning fog that clung to the ground like smoke. They had driven through the night, stopping only once for gas and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, but kept them awake. Dorothy carried her phone in her jacket pocket. On it, 73 photographs of names carved in stone. Evidence that couldn't be buried now because she had already made copies. Sent them to 3 different email addresses. Uploaded them to a cloud service she barely understood but trusted because Bobby had shown her how. The building was modern, glass and steel, American flags hanging motionless in the still air. A security checkpoint at the entrance. Bobby parked and they sat for a moment, neither speaking. "You ready?" he finally asked. Dorothy looked at the building, thought about Frank standing in a different federal building 40 years ago, raising his right hand, swearing to tell the truth. Thought about what that truth had cost him, what it had cost her. No, she said, but we're going in anyway. The lobby was empty except for a security guard behind a desk and a metal detector at the entrance. Dorothy and Bobby passed through it. The guard checked their IDs, made them sign in, asked them to state their business. "We need to speak with someone in charge," Dorothy said. "We have evidence of federal crimes." The guard looked at her the way people often did, an old woman making claims that were probably nothing. But he followed protocol, made a phone call, spoke quietly, hung up. "Someone will be down in a few minutes. You can wait over there." They sat on a bench against the wall. Dorothy's knees ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. She was 80 years old, and she had spent the last 48 hours crawling through tunnels and running from explosions and documenting evidence that powerful men had spent decades trying to hide. She felt every year of it. 20 minutes later, a door opened and a man emerged. He was in his 60s. Gray hair cut military short, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on a frame built for fatigues. He moved like a soldier, shoulders back, eyes alert. When he saw Dorothy, something shifted in his expression. Recognition. He crossed the lobby and extended his hand. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Deputy Director Marcus Webb. I served with your husband in Vietnam. Echo Company 1st Battalion, 1969. Dorothy stood and shook his hand. His grip was firm, but careful. The grip of someone who understood that strength without control was just violence. "Frank never mentioned you," she said. "We lost touch after the war. But I heard about his testimony in '85. Took guts to stand up to Crane." Webb's eyes moved to Bobby. "You must be Robert. Your father talked about you, sent photos. You were what, 10 years old when I last saw one?" "Yes, sir." Webb gestured toward the door he'd come through. "Why don't we talk upstairs, somewhere more private?" They followed him to an elevator, up 3 floors, down a corridor lined with photographs of agents killed in the line of duty, into a conference room with a long table and windows overlooking the street. Webb closed the door and gestured for them to sit. "The guard said you have evidence of federal crimes. What are we talking about?" Dorothy pulled out her phone. set it on the table. 40 years of corruption, documented in detail. Names, dates, amounts, all of it carved into stone in a bunker that was destroyed last night trying to kill us. Webb's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He leaned forward slightly, focused. Start from the beginning. So Dorothy did. She told him about the auction, the $5 purchase, the bunker, finding the safe house, the letters from James Keller, the note about protocol failure, finding Torres's body in the wall, Anna Volkov, the testimony that never happened, Thomas Crane, his son William, the threats, the metal box being stolen, the stone chamber with the ledger carved into walls that couldn't be burned. Webb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have proof of any of this?" Dorothy unlocked her phone and handed it to him. He scrolled through the photographs slowly. His face remained neutral, but she saw his jaw tighten with each image. Names he recognized. Names that still held power. Names that belonged to people who thought they were safe. He set the phone down carefully. "This is explosive. If even half of this is accurate, it implicates sitting officials, former officials, people with resources to fight back hard. I know. Mrs. Sullivan, you understand what you're asking me to do. Opening this investigation will trigger a firestorm. Careers will end. Reputations will be destroyed. And there will be pushback. Legal. Political. Maybe worse. Deputy Director Webb, someone tried to kill us last night. Destroyed evidence of federal crimes. Threatened to make us disappear the same way they made Anna Volkov disappear 40 years ago. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you what happened. What you do with it is your call." Webb looked at her for a long moment. Then at Bobby. Then back at the phone. "I served with your husband in some of the worst fighting of the war," he said quietly. "I watched him carry wounded men through fire. I watched him stand between our position and the enemy when everyone else was ready to run. Frank Sullivan was the bravest man I ever knew. Not because he wasn't afraid, because he did what needed doing even when he was terrified." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up. People heading to work, living normal lives, unaware that in this room decisions were being made that would change everything. "There's something you should know," Webb said, still facing the window. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous package. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with coordinates and a note that said, "Protocol failed. They're still looking." I didn't know what it meant. Ran the coordinates. They matched a property that had been sealed since the 80s. I flagged it for review, but it was low priority. Just another cold case in a system full of them. He turned back to face them. That package came from someone who knew I served with Frank. Someone who knew I could be trusted. Someone who was waiting for the right moment. "James Keller," Dorothy said. "Possibly. Or someone working with him. Either way, this wasn't random. You finding that bunker wasn't luck. It was engineered. Someone wanted it found. Wanted it documented. Wanted someone like you to ask the questions that needed asking." Bobby spoke for the first time. "So what happens now?" Webb returned to the table. picked up his desk phone, pressed a button. I need a forensic team mobilized, full excavation equipment, and get me the U.S. attorney. Tell her it's urgent. He hung up and looked at Dorothy. Now we dig up the truth, literally. The excavation began that afternoon. Dorothy and Bobby watched from a distance as FBI teams cordoned off the area around the collapsed bunker. Heavy equipment arrived. Backhoes, excavators, ground-penetrating radar to map what remained below the surface. Webb had insisted they stay away from the actual site. Too dangerous. Too much media attention once word got out. But he gave them a spot on a ridge overlooking the clearing where they could see without being seen. How long will this take? Bobby asked. Days, maybe weeks. Dorothy sat on a fallen log and watched the machines begin to move earth. But they'll find it. The stone chamber is buried deep, built to last. And if they don't, they will. I documented everything. Even if the chamber is destroyed, we have proof it existed. Proof of what was written there. Bobby was quiet for the moment. Then, Mom, there's something I need to say. Say it. When I sold your house, when I lied to you, I told myself it was to protect the family. To protect Sarah and the kids. To protect you from the fallout if the truth came out about Iraq. He paused. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was I was ashamed. Ashamed of what I'd done. Ashamed I'd stayed quiet. And I thought if I could just make it go away, if I could pay whatever price they wanted, I could keep pretending I was still the man Dad raised me to be. Dorothy looked at her son. This man carrying his father's name and his own burden of silence. You want to know what your father would say? She asked. Yes. He'd say shame is what you feel before you make it right. After that, it's just history. She reached over and took his hand. You're making it right now. That's what matters. Bobby's eyes were wet, but he didn't look away. I don't know if I can forgive myself. Then start with asking forgiveness from the people who deserve it. Sarah, your kids. The family in Fallujah who died because your CO was on someone's payroll. She squeezed his hand. And maybe one day you'll forgive yourself too. The excavation continued for 6 days. Dorothy stayed at a motel near the site. Bobby went home for 2 of those days. Came back with Sarah and the kids. Dorothy met them in the motel parking lot. It was awkward at first. Sarah uncertain. The kids confused about why Grandma was suddenly involved in something that made the news, but they worked through it. Slowly. Bobby told Sarah everything. Dorothy watched her daughter-in-law's face go through shock, anger, understanding. By the time he finished, Sarah was crying, but she was also holding his hand. You should have told me, she said. I know. I would have stood with you. I know that too. Now, the kids didn't understand all of it. But they understood enough. Their father had made mistakes. Their grandmother was trying to fix something broken. And sometimes family meant standing together even when you didn't have all the answers. On the 7th day, Webb called. We found it. Dorothy and Bobby drove to the site. The media was being kept away, but she could see news helicopters circling in the distance. The excavation had opened a massive pit. At the bottom, partially exposed the stone chamber. Webb met them at the edge. It survived. Not intact, but enough. We've documented over 400 names so far, cross-referencing with active cases. Some of these people are dead, some retired, but at least 40 are still in positions of authority. When will you make arrests? Soon. We're building cases, making sure everything is airtight. But, Mrs. Sullivan, you need to prepare yourself. This is gonna get ugly. The people implicated have resources, lawyers, political connections. They're going to fight. Let them fight. There's something else. Webb pulled out a folder. We found remains in the bunker. Confirmed as Agent Michael Torres. Cause of death matches what you told us. Single gunshot wound. Execution style. He paused. There's going to be a service. Military honors. He's being recognized posthumously for dying in the line of duty. Good. And we've been contacted by someone claiming to be James Keller. Says he has additional testimony. Wants immunity in exchange. Dorothy felt something shift in her chest. Where is he? He wouldn't say, but he's agreed to come in. Under specific conditions, one of which is that you're present when he testifies. When? Tomorrow. Federal courthouse. Closed hearing. Just prosecutors, investigators, and witnesses. Webb looked at her carefully. He specifically asked for you to be there. Said you earned the right to see how this ends. The courthouse was old stone, built in an era when government buildings were designed to intimidate. High ceilings, marble floors. The weight of law pressed into architecture. Dorothy walked through metal detectors and down corridors lined with portraits of judges whose names she didn't recognize. Webb met her at the hearing room door. Bobby was already inside, sitting in the back row. The room was small. No jury box. Just a judge's bench, a witness stand, and rows of seats for observers. Prosecutors sat at one table. FBI personnel at another, and in the front row, wearing a suit that looked strange on him, James Keller. He turned when Dorothy entered. Their eyes met. He stood and crossed to her. Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Keller, I heard about the explosion. I'm glad you made it out. So am I. I spent 40 years hiding, telling myself I was staying alive to matter someday. To testify when it was safe. His voice was rough with something that might have been regret. But the truth is, I was just afraid. Afraid of what standing up would cost. Your husband wasn't afraid. Or if he was, he stood anyway. That's the difference between courage and survival. You're here now, that's what matters. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat. The hearing began. Keller took the stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Then he told it, all of it. Building the safe house, protecting Anna Volkov, Thomas Crane's corruption, Torres's murder, Anna's escape, his own 40 years of hiding. The prosecutors asked questions. Keller answered. Detailed, precise. The testimony of someone who had been waiting decades to speak. When they asked about the ledger, he explained about the stone chamber, about Anna's paranoia, about her insisting on a record that couldn't be destroyed. She was smarter than all of us, Keller said. She knew paper could burn, files could be deleted, Witnesses could disappear, but Stone lasts. Stone remembers. "Do you know where Anna Volkov is now?" the prosecutor asked. "No. I put her on a boat in Seattle. Told her to go north and never come back. That was June 1985. I haven't heard from her since. Is she alive? I don't know." The hearing lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Keller was placed in protective custody pending further testimony. Dorothy and Bobby left through a side exit to avoid media that had gathered outside. Webb walked them to Bobby's truck. "We're moving fast now. Warrants are being issued. Arrests will start within 48 hours. You need to prepare for this to become public. Very public." "I've never cared much about privacy," Dorothy said. "Good. Because you're about to lose what little you had left." He handed her a card. "My direct number. Any problems, any threats, you call immediately." "How many arrests?" 47 so far, including Senator Richard Porter." Bobby's head snapped up. "My CO." "Yes. Among other charges, he's being indicted for accepting bribes and ordering the cover-up of civilian casualties in Iraq. Your testimony about the Fallujah incident will be part of the case." "I'll testify," Bobby said immediately. "Whatever you need." Webb nodded. "I know you will. That takes courage, too." The arrests began the next morning. Dorothy watched the news in her motel room. Footage of federal agents leading officials out of offices in handcuffs. Senators, judges, police chiefs, business leaders. Each one claiming innocence. Each one promising to fight the charges. William Crane was arrested at his office. The news showed him being walked out. His expensive suit rumpled his face, set in fury. He saw the cameras and spoke directly to them. "This is a witch hunt, based on fabricated evidence planted by unstable individuals. My family has served Montana for generations. We will not be destroyed by lies." Dorothy watched him disappear into a federal vehicle. Felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger. Just a quiet certainty that some debts took 40 years to come due, but they came due nonetheless. Her phone rang. Webb's number. "Turn on Channel 7. She changed channels. A press conference. U.S. attorney standing at a podium. Behind her, photographs of the stone chamber. Names visible on the walls. "Today, federal prosecutors have filed charges against 47 individuals in what may be the largest corruption case in Montana history. The evidence comes from a witness protection case dating to 1985. A case that was buried literally and figuratively to protect those who had betrayed the public trust." The attorney continued speaking. But Dorothy's attention was caught by someone in the crowd. An older woman, maybe 60, standing at the back. She looked familiar, but Dorothy couldn't place her. Then the woman looked directly at the camera, smiled slightly, and walked away. Dorothy's breath caught. Anna Volkov, still alive, still watching. Still waiting to see if her insurance had finally paid off. The trials began 3 months later. Not one trial, multiple. Federal, state, military. The cases sprawled across jurisdictions and legal systems. Bobby testified about Iraq, about the cover-up, about Porter's orders to lie. His testimony was calm, detailed. He didn't make excuses, didn't blame others, Just told the truth about what happened and what he did and what he should have done differently. Porter's defense tried to discredit him, called him unreliable, said he was making false accusations to absolve himself. But the ledger supported Bobby's account. Porter had been paid. The dates matched. The cover-up was documented. The jury convicted Porter on 11 counts: obstruction, conspiracy, accepting bribes. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. William Crane's trial was different, more theatrical. His lawyers argued the evidence was tainted, that the bunker excavation was illegal, that Dorothy had broken into federal property, that the photos couldn't be authenticated. But the prosecutors had the physical chamber. They brought the jury to see it, made them walk among the walls reading names carved in stone, made them understand that this wasn't fabricated. This was permanent. This was real. Crane was convicted. 23 counts, including conspiracy to murder federal agents. He got 25 years, no parole. During sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say. Crane stood, looked directly at Dorothy sitting in the gallery. My father built something good in this state. Your husband destroyed it. And now you've finished what he started. I hope you're satisfied. Dorothy met his eyes, didn't look away. Your father built his reputation on blood money. My husband exposed it, and I made sure it stayed exposed. The only difference is I'm still here to see it finished. Crane sat down. He didn't speak again. 8 months after Dorothy bought a bunker for $5, she stood in a clearing 20 miles north of Helena, watching workers install the last piece of the memorial. It wasn't large, wasn't flashy, just a granite monument with names carved into it. Frank Sullivan, Michael Torres, Anna Volkov, and beneath those three, a dedication for those who stood when others ran, for those who spoke when silence was safer, for those who believed truth matters more than survival. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon. Dorothy arrived early, wanted time alone with it before the crowds came, before the speeches, before it became official. She stood in front of Frank's name, traced the letters with her finger. We did it, she said quietly. It took 40 years, but we did it. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Bobby approached with a young man beside him, 17, tall, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. Frank's grandson. Dorothy's great-grandson, whom she barely knew because 2 years of being temporary had made her a stranger to her own family. Grandma, this is Daniel. Danny, he wanted to meet you. The boy stepped forward, extended his hand. Dorothy shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. Grandpa Bobby told me what you did, Danny said. What you and great-grandpa Frank did. I just wanted to say, I'm proud to be related to you. Something in Dorothy's chest loosened. Something she hadn't known was tight. Thank you. I enlisted, Danny said. Marines. Ship out for basic in 3 weeks. Dorothy looked at Bobby. He nodded. Pride and fear mixed in his expression. Your choice, she asked Danny. Yes, ma'am. Grandpa Bobby told me what happened to him in Iraq. Told me about making mistakes and learning to live with them. Said the uniform doesn't make you honorable. Your choices do. He paused. I want to make choices I can live with. Then you'll do fine. People began arriving, veterans mostly, from Vietnam, Korea, the Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan. Different wars, different generations, same understanding. Webb came, brought a color guard. They posted flags at the memorial. American, POWMIA, Montana state flag. Keller came, out of hiding permanently now. His testimony had helped convict 19 people. He looked smaller in daylight, older, but also lighter, like 40 years of weight had finally been lifted. He approached Dorothy. I never thanked you properly. For what? For finishing what I should have finished 40 years ago. You did what you could. I survived. You fought. There's a difference. The ceremony began. The mayor spoke. Webb spoke. The U.S. attorney spoke. Each one talking about corruption exposed, justice served, the importance of standing up. Then Dorothy was asked to speak. She hadn't prepared anything, hadn't expected to be called on. But she walked to the small podium and looked out at the assembled crowd. 200 people, maybe more. Veterans in uniform, families of those named on the memorial, media at the back, all of them watching her, waiting for her to say something meaningful. She thought about Frank, about the night he came home after testifying, how he'd sat at their kitchen table and said, I did what I had to do. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. She thought about Torres dying in a bunker to protect a witness who disappeared anyway. She thought about Anna Volkov carving names in stone because she understood that the truth had to outlast the people who wanted it buried. My husband used to say that honor isn't something you wear. It's something you carry. Her voice was steady, clear. He carried it to Vietnam and back. He carried it when he testified against powerful men. He carried it until the day he died. And when I found this place, this bunker where good people died trying to do the right thing, I realized I'd been carrying something too. She paused, looked at the names on the memorial. I'd been carrying the belief that I didn't matter anymore. That at 80 years old with no home and no resources, I was just taking up space in other people's lives. But this place taught me something. It taught me that mattering isn't about how much you have. It's about what you're willing to stand for when everything else is gone. She looked at Bobby, at Danny, at Keller. So this memorial isn't just for the dead. It's for anyone who's still fighting to believe their choices matter. That speaking up matters. That standing up matters. Even when it costs everything. Especially when it costs everything. She stepped back from the podium. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then everyone. Dorothy didn't wait for it to finish. She walked back to Frank's name, stood in front of it. The ceremony continued around her, but she barely heard it. She was thinking about a different ceremony, 40 years ago. Frank receiving a commendation for his testimony, standing straight in his suit that was too big and his tie that was too tight. Proud, scared, certain. You'd have liked this, she said quietly. All of it. except the part where I almost got blown up. You'd have been angry about that. Mrs. Sullivan, she turned. A woman stood behind her, maybe 60, wearing a simple dress and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. The woman from the press conference, Anna Volkov. "I wanted to thank you," Anna said. Her accent was faint but still there, Russian underneath American English. "For making sure my insurance paid off. You're still alive." Clearly, a small smile. "I went north like Keller told me. Canada, then Alaska. Changed my name. Married a fisherman. Had 2 children. Lived a quiet life. But I always watched. Always waited. To see if what I carved in that stone would ever matter. Why didn't you come forward?" "Because I was afraid. Same as Keller. Same as everyone else who knew the truth but stayed quiet." She looked at the memorial, at the names. "But you weren't afraid. Or you were and you did it anyway. That's different." "I had nothing left to lose." "No," Anna shook her head. "You had everything to lose. Your safety, your life, your family. But you risked it because you believed the truth was worth more." She reached out and touched the memorial. "That's courage. Real courage. What will you do now?" "Go home. To Alaska. To my family. But I wanted you to know. What you did mattered. Not just for the people who got justice. For people like me who spent 40 years wondering if running was the right choice." She paused. "It wasn't. Standing was. You proved that." Anna walked away, disappeared into the crowd. Dorothy watched her go, then turned back to the memorial. The ceremony ended. People began to leave. Bobby and Danny came over. "Mom, we're heading out. Danny has to get back for some pre-enlistment stuff. You coming?" "In a minute." They left. The crowd thinned. Soon it was just Dorothy and the memorial and the Montana sky turning gold with sunset. Footsteps approached. Keller. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "It's a free country." He stood beside her. They looked at the names together. 40 years, Keller said. "That's how long I carried the weight of knowing Torres died and I didn't. Knowing I ran when I should have stayed. Knowing I chose survival over duty. You're here now because you gave me a reason to be. Because you showed me it's never too late to stand up. Even when you're old. Even when you're scared. Even when everyone tells you it doesn't matter. Does it matter? You tell me." 47 people in prison. Dozens more cases being built. A memorial to people who did the right thing. Truth exposed after 4 decades of lies. He looked at her. "You really asking if it matters?" Dorothy smiled slightly. "No, I guess I'm not." They stood in silence for a while. Then Keller spoke again. "What will you do now?" "I don't know. The church let me stay in that room as long as I need. But I'm thinking maybe it's time to find something more permanent." "You have the money from the bunker settlement." The government had indeed compensated her. Not much, but enough. Enough to rent an apartment. Buy a car that didn't break down. Live without depending on other people's charity. "I have options," Dorothy agreed. "That's new. Must feel good." "It feels strange. I got so used to having nothing that Having something feels like I'm doing it wrong. Keller laughed. A rough sound, unpracticed. I know that feeling. More silence. Comfortable this time. Two people who had carried weight for too long learning what it felt like to set it down. I should go, Keller said finally. Long drive back to Idaho. You're going back, for now, but I'm thinking of moving closer. Maybe Montana. This state has some bad memories, but some good ones too. And I'm tired of running from both. He extended his hand. Dorothy shook it. Thank you, Keller said, for everything. Thank you for building something worth finding. He walked away. Dorothy stood alone with the memorial as the sun dropped below the mountains and the sky turned from gold to purple to black. Stars came out. Cold pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. She pulled Frank's field jacket tighter around her shoulders. It still smelled like him, faintly, underneath the years. Old spice and gunpowder and the particular scent of someone who had carried heavy things for a long time. I'm tired, Frank, she said quietly. Bone tired? The kind of tired that comes from fighting battles you never wanted to fight. But I did it. I finished what you started. And I'm still here, still standing. The wind moved through the grass. The memorial stood silent, permanent. Dorothy reached out and touched Frank's name one last time. Then Bobby's truck appeared in the distance, headlights cutting through the darkness. He pulled up beside her. Danny in the passenger seat, both of them waiting. Thought you might want to ride home, Bobby called. Home to where? Wherever you want it to be. Dorothy looked at the memorial one last time, at the names, at the dedication, at the proof that standing up mattered even when you were 80 years old and invisible and forgotten. Then she got in the truck. They drove in silence for a while. Then Danny spoke from the back seat. Grandma, can I ask you something? Go ahead. When I go to basic, when I get deployed, when I'm in situations where I have to choose between what's easy and what's right. He paused. How do I know I'll make the right choice? Dorothy thought about this, about Frank, about Torres, about herself standing in a bunker deciding whether to run or fight. You don't know, she said finally. You just have to trust that you've been raised by people who taught you what matters. And then you make the choice. And then you live with it. And if you made the wrong choice, you make it right however you can. What if I can't make it right? Then you carry it. The way your grandfather carried Iraq. The way I carried 2 years of being nowhere. You carry it until it becomes part of who you are. And you make sure the next choice is better. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll do my best. That's all anyone can do. They drove through the night. Back toward Helena. Back toward lives that would never be quite the same. Bobby had his redemption. Danny had his future. Keller had his freedom, and Dorothy had her answer. She had asked herself, standing in that bunker for the first time, whether a $5 purchase mattered, whether she mattered, whether any of it mattered when you were old and alone and invisible. Now she knew it mattered because she made it matter. Because she stood when others looked away. Because she spoke when silence was easier. Because she chose to believe that truth was worth more than survival. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness. Montana stretched around them. vast and empty and full of stories buried in earth and memory and silence. But not this story. Not anymore. This story was carved in stone, written in names, spoken in testimonies, remembered in a memorial that would stand long after Dorothy Sullivan was gone. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Let the motion of the truck rock her. Let the sound of Bobby and Danny's quiet conversation wash over her. For the first time in 3 years since Frank died and the house was sold, and her life became temporary, Dorothy felt something she had forgotten existed. Peace. Not the peace that comes from having everything. The peace that comes from knowing you did everything you could with what you had. That when the moment came to stand up or shut up, you stood. That when the choice was between comfort and courage, you chose courage. That when someone asked what you were worth, you showed them. $5, she thought. That's what they thought I was worth. She smiled in the darkness. They were wrong.